Hello and welcome back to Big Les's League and all rugby league experience. I'm your host, Big Les. We're gonna go through the team analysis. Welcome to episode 2 of the halftime chat with Lee Addison. And what there wouldn't be a better person to do this with than Lee Addison. So Lee,
That's a big call.
I'm giving you a bit of a shout out there, Lee. I know it's been a bit of a tough week up where you are at the moment. How are you coping with all that?
Personally, I'm fine. My own home didn't come under any pressure. My road was closed. If I turned left, if I turned right, I just had to go the long way around. A bit of work was affected. I found myself being really upset, though, Les, by seeing community clubs go underwater. One in particular, Carolee Tornadoes, where I've been running one of my aim higher clinics. It was really immersed in water. The water was twice the height of URI. My old school, Ipswich State High School, a matter of days before we recorded our last one, I sponsored a cup competition between my two old schools, Mabel and Ipswich State High School, the second incarnation of it, and this one was at Ipswich State High School. Within a matter of days after that, that was also immersed in water beyond the crossbar on the field. And my heart just breaks because community clubs and schools in particular are a massive part of people's communities, massive part of people's lives. So my heart goes out to all them. I'll do some help with cleanup wherever I can. But obviously, people have lost homes, or people have been asked to evacuate, or lost items. Genuine heartbreak is my emotional reaction, Les, and my overwhelming reaction. And no doubt, you being south of the Tweed, I just hope it gets a little bit easier the further south it goes.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping so too, especially what I've seen from Brisbane and just up in Queensland at the moment. Some of the scenes that were on the news the other night, and it was just horrific. Like, I literally saw I don't know if you saw this one, Lee, but there was a thing on Channel 9 about the bunch of people that lived on this big street, and it was basically now a big ditch just in the middle of the woods, and they basically
Yeah,
had to go like cross this log and go through this forest to other people in need, and they were picking up houses with cranes and tearing them in half. They found a 95-year-old lady floating on the water that they had to rescue. I mean, it's just hectic, and it's the last thing we need after COVID and after all the things we've had, the bushfires. Yeah, this is probably the last thing we were hoping to get or wanted or needed, to be honest.
what I do say to people is that just thank God we don't live in 1922, because that would have been even worse. But everything is relative. So we live quite cushy lives here in Australia. So the two things that you just mentioned, COVID and floods. And don't forget, if we were in Victoria, we'd be talking bushfires, COVID, and then maybe floods. The It's all relative, but yeah, overall we are lucky, Les, aren't we? We do have a good life. I mean, we've got good shelter despite the weather outside. We can control the temperature in our homes. We're doing all right overall, and of course the football season's upon us, and there's plenty of reason to be somewhat positive.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I'm trying to take all the positivity out of that as well. Especially since I'm not up there. I'm so grateful that I'm down here and not going through all that. Because it just doesn't look pretty. And again, my
Yeah.
heart goes out to all the people up there as well. It's quite horrific, and I hope that in the next few days even that they can recover from that. And it's going to take a while, but I just wish people up in Brisbane all the best at the moment. It is definitely going to be very tough for them to recover from that. Um, but let's get into this team analysis. I've got a very little interesting podcast up for today. We're going to be doing the Cronulla Sharks, the South Sydney Rabbitohs, and the Gold Coast Titans. We'll start off with the Cronulla Sharks. What are your opening thoughts about Cronulla going into this year?
They've bought recruited some good players. I like the signing of Finnecane and Nico Hines. They're two players who've come from the benchmark club in the country, in the world. They're going to bring some of that culture with them. And obviously, Mcginnis is a good signing too. He and Finucane are really going to toughen up the middle of the field. I also think that this is a real pivotal year in Sharks short history. Let's not forget how John Morris was ushered out of the door a matter of months ago, really. That was something that stuck in the craw of a lot of people. We don't know the full story behind the scenes, but I do know and have met John Morris, and he's a lovely man. So, and he was also a stalwart of that club and deserved to be treated a lot better in many people's opinions. So this is a real key year for them and a real key era, be it 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. All the signs and the sounds coming out of Cronulla are good, though, which is interesting. And I'm sure we'll unpack that now.
Yeah, well, I'm, as a South fan, very happy to have John Morris in the coaching staff for sure. We definitely it was a good signing for us. We poached him off them, but yeah, it was quite unfortunate to see him leave the building. I think what he was doing at that club was quite good, consistently making finals. Really couldn't complain there. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year for Cronulla. I really like how they're going to go this year, and they've got a pretty decent squad, especially with the additions, like you say, of Nico Hines and Dale Finucane as well. It's really going to be an interesting year for the Cronulla Sharks. We'll get into some of these stats. I'll move our cameras out of the way. But signings, we've obviously got Dale Finucane and Nico Hines. Jaden Beryl, I think he was from the Rugby Nines, from what I can take from that one.
No, he was from Wynnum Manly.
Wynnum Manly.
I used to coach with his dad.
Right. Okay. So I've definitely missed someone there.
Yeah. Great story, actually, because he was in the Broncos under 20s, maybe 2013, 2012, 2013. And, you know, he'd have every reason to give the game a miss if he thought he was not going to make the NRL and pursue opportunities. And now he's got a chance to come down south and play in Sydney. And it's a lesson for all kids listening. You know, don't ever give up on your dream. Jaden Beryl is not a teenager, and it's a really interesting story, that, and a real heartwarming story.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait to see him debut. What position does he play again? Is he a hooker? I'm pretty sure he's a hooker. Yeah.
Hooker. It's funny, for another venture, I've been analysing the Q Cup Grand Final last year, and he's a typical hooker in the sense that he makes 1,000 tackles in the middle of the field and has a good intuition around the play of the ball. He'd be a very, very, very solid footballer for Cronulla Sharks, and he's never going to let you down. He's one of those players, and he's the kind of player I think that you want to have in your team, the kind of player you want to play with. Whether he's going to be a top-line NRL first grader or not, I can't sit here and say. But again, it's a bit like the story of the half that we jinxed last week, didn't we? We jinxed him, didn't we, Fogarty?
Oh, God.
Canberra. Yeah. So maybe I should stop talking about Jaden Beryl. But when you see a story like that, you know that the kid's got the man. You know the man's got fortitude. You know he's got fight. You know he's got ticker. You know he's got a will to improve. You know he's got a never say die attitude. And those are characteristics that really suit the sport of rugby league. So Cronulla Sharks, this fella's not going to let you down. Whether he's going to be a top line NRL player, still open to debate, but he's going to give it his damn best shot.
Yeah, I can't wait to see him debut for the Sharks. It's going to be very interesting to see how he goes. The guy I was talking about before was Lachlan Miller. Lachlan Miller was the one that came from the Rugby Nines. And I'm pretty sure he can pretty much play anywhere, to be honest. From what I heard, he's a back row centre. But yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how that guy goes. You really don't know with these Rugby Nines guys at all where they sort of fit in.
On that note of back row centre, I mean, 20 years ago, that would have been unheard of, saying that somebody was a back rower or a centre. The role of a second row has evolved so much, and so many second rows and centres just switch positions now because they defend left side and right side, and they just basically defend either side of the halves in most teams. So, yeah, that was just something that was interesting to pick up there in your commentary about that player.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting to see where these rugby guys sort of fit into teams, and they've got some really good other signings here as well. Cronulla, Matt Ikuvalu, another one who I really think is going to be a good one for them. Great depth for the centres and the wing spots. I reckon he's going to add a lot to that team, whether he starts, whether he is that sort of depth guy that they bring in due to injury. It'll be very interesting to see how they use him. Do you have any sort of thoughts on Matt Ikuvalu? Anything that you've seen from him that you liked, stuff like that?
I remember him coming up through the Toyota Cup, as it was called then, for Manly. I do sort of feel that he's not necessarily played his absolute best football yet. He's in his peak now physically, you would have thought, at his age. So his best football could be to come. And I also think the point that you just make there, Les, vis-a-vis the competition for places there. I mean, can you imagine somebody like my man Ronaldo Mulatalo just stepping aside and letting Matt Ikuvalu take his spot? You know, there's some real good depth there. The thing I mean, because I'm a coach, I keep doing this, but we keep going. I keep talking about coaches, but Fitzgibbon being the new coach is huge. In many ways, it should be an unrecognisable club. In a recent interview I did with Ronaldo Mulatalo for my YouTube channel, he talked about the pre-season that they were having, and by all accounts, it was the most intense pre-season Ronaldo had since he'd been down there in Sydney. And he says that Fitzgibbon has very much a win or you are nothing mentality. And he brings that into his training. So when you hear stories like that, mate, you just know you're going to get something different out of Cronulla. And obviously the big unknown for so many teams in the NRL, particularly in round 1 and 2, and maybe 3, they don't know how a Craig Fitzgibbon side is going to play. They'll know that he's coached the odd rep team here and there, but that isn't necessarily going to be the framework that he's going to follow. This is probably the first time he's had full control of the pre-season. It's going to be very hard for the teams in round 1, 2, and maybe 3 to do homework and really shut down something. They're going to have to start looking at things like where certain players kick the ball and which players are weak on what shoulder or which players pass weaker left to right. They're going to have to look in that detail as opposed to Craig Fitzgibbon's sides do this out of exit or they do this in good ball. So if they're ready, if Cronulla are ready, if they've had a real good pre-season, obviously Wade Graham's a loss. I'll talk about that in a minute. But if they have had a real big, strong pre-season, then they could snatch a couple of wins early because the opposition don't know anything about them in terms of how they are going to play tactically. And, you know, when I'm analysing opposition, the first thing I look at is the tactics. Where do they run the ball? How do they come out of exit? How do they play in a holding pattern? How do they attack when they're on our try line? And how do they defend? How do the markers operate? Do they split? Do they shoot out? All these kind of things. Are they up and in? Are they an up and out defence? And nobody knows. The NRL coaches at the minute do not know. The only indicator they will have had is from some trials. And even then, there's no guarantee that that's what's going forward. Wade Graham, mate, I'm going to ask you that one. What a loss for a first month.
I know. I was spewing, and he's been out for ages. So he's had a really bad luck with head knocks. And then now the syndesmosis injury, which is surprisingly getting really common now. Like, I didn't even know what a syndesmosis was until early to late 2020. And then all the players were getting them. And it was really unfortunate.
I say this, and this is going off on a tangent a little bit, Les, but I know you love my tangents. as a full-time sport, we're still in our infancy. We came full-time in 1993, 94, I think. And I think back then it was a case of, we've just got more time, let's just train more. And what's happening is now the big evolution and revolution in the game has all been around physical prowess, has all been around the gymnasium, the PBs on the field, on the training field. And we're pushing a lot of our players to big limits. And as a result, we're getting different injuries. I mean, the pectoral tear, that's pretty much a new one for the last decade and a half. Nobody ever did one of them in 1960, I don't think. And that's obviously because of the weights we're doing, but also the amount of wrestling, in inverted commas, that's taking place in the game, and knee reconstructions in young kids. And because we're building players that are in bodies bigger than what God designed for them. So when you talk about that injury, that will happen. That will continue to happen because, in my opinion, the game is still learning how to be full time, and they're doing it by trial and error sometimes with some of the training methods.
It's not even just full time as well. It's more so the game's changing. The rules are changing. Yep. The game's faster, and that in itself really sort of changes, how players are going to play. Again, you as you said as well, the rotating, the grappling movements, the tackling techniques changing. That's what's really getting players injured, in my opinion, I reckon. And it's a lot more the fact that the game is so much of a faster pace than, as you said, in 1960 or even in 1990. Like every 10 years, the game just seems to get faster. And that's what's hurting players, really. It's the fact that they got to cope to these new rule changes. I got to be here. Okay, now I got to be here. Okay, we're going to be doing this now. All of a sudden, you're putting so much pressure on your body that it's just rip and tear.
On this note, Les, too. Sorry if I ever interrupt you. There's just obviously a slight delay, isn't there, on the recording? On the evolution of the game. I mean, this year and next year, as in 2023-24, the teams that are the most mobile, the teams that have the most or the best ability to play what's in front of them, the ability to keep forwards on for longer periods, because we now have a sport that has restricted interchange, so that was quite a significant change. But also we've got the 6 again rules, which really, for a while there, they took some of the attrition away. And I thought there was something that was quite prevalent last year. The coaches who were complaining about the rule changes were all the ones lower down on the ladder. The coaches higher up in the ladder, they'd adapted, changed their conditioning efforts in the week, trimmed a little bit of body fat off their players. One thing I have noticed talking to a few NRL players and a few pictures I've seen and footage I've seen, a lot of NRL players are looking a little bit trimmer this off-season. That's going to be a combination of them having a full off-season, which they've not had for a while, so many of them, because there was no internationals. But also, they'll be preparing a lot of these teams for a more mobile brand of football. And again, that a lot of these predictions could end up going flip-flopping, because there's going to be a team that shocks just because they are better at this mobility, this mobile brand of football.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting how the game looks in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years. It's just going to change so much, and it's only going to get faster. So the more teams adapt, the higher they're going to be on the ladder.
I might dust the boots off and come back out to play.
Well, I'm already out there now, so you may as well come and join me. I think there's a spare spot on the Wombats team, so I'll let the coach know, and
no worries.
Plenty of room there for you. We'll go through the losses now, because there's a few losses here, and then we'll sort of touch on Cameron Mcginnis as well, because that's a pretty hectic injury that he's. He obviously had the ACL, but it's from what I'm hearing, it's a clean out from the surgery, which was quite weird timing for me. I'm not sure.
How long is he going to be out for?
I think he's going to be out for the first. I think it's the first few months. I think it's 2 to 3 months. It's very similar to Jamal, I think, time period. 2 different surgeries. Jamal, I had a look on the NRL physio. Just the procedure, the sort of way that that's going to be operated. It did not look nice at all. The bones were
I think
everywhere. It was,
I think he's still a good signing in the sense that he's going to be around the place, and he'll be there for the second half of the season, basically. So
yeah, it's still both signings, Cam McGinnis, Jamal Fogarty, great ones still. But we'll go through these losses because there are quite a few here, and there will be for the next 2 teams. I find it was crazy how many losses they had, but we got Will Chambers, Josh Dugan, Sean Johnson, Nene McDonald, Billy Magoulias, Chad Townsend, Aaron Woods. That's a lot. That is a lot of experience out the door.
one thing that jumps out, and I'll be honest, I don't know any of these guys personally. I know people who know them, and they're obviously great friends. So I want to be very careful how I say this, but you may remember Will Chambers last year had a few issues a bit later in the year where he spoke up a little bit on the field. It wasn't a great look. Josh Dugan has had his moments where he's not been great off the field. Sean Johnson, I would imagine, isn't always, I wouldn't say professional. He always is professional. I just get the impression that he's in and out a bit as a player. Like he doesn't always put his stamp on every game kind of thing. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh there.
I think it was more so him wanting to go back to the Warriors. That's why he left. He was there for a long time. I think it's a great call there from Sean Johnson going home. Well, what he calls home. I think that's more so why he went over there as well. But Sean Johnson's a fantastic player.
Chad Townsend, I mean, he's okay. Chad Townsend, I wouldn't say. I don't think you can see yourself winning a premiership with Chad Townsend steering you around, kind of thing. And Aaron Woods, we mentioned him last week. We talked about him positively last week, and I think he's a good signing for St. George. But at the same time, I do think there are better front rowers than Aaron Woods running around. And I look at the middles that they have signed, and I think they look in better shape. And again, what I will say about the Sharks is they've been all right in junior reps for the last few years. They've been quite good. So they're going to have, last year they unearthed a couple, the year before they unearthed a couple. Let's just assume that they will again.
Yeah, for sure. It's some big losses in experience, but as you say, most of these guys aren't the flashiest guys in the park. It's still a lot of experience. Chad Townsend's won a premiership over there. Will Chambers has won a few for the Storm. Dugan, he is a classy player, and I know at the back end of his career he did have a few issues, but he still was a great player. He still had an awesome career. Sean Johnson, going back to the Warriors, going back home. Didn't really get to see much of Nene McDonald over the past few years. He was obviously at the North Queensland, but we didn't really get to see much of him over at the Sharks. He was obviously, I think he was over in the Super League. I think it was.
Where's he gone to now? That one's escaped me. Where's he gone to now?
I actually don't know. I think he's just been released by the club. Okay. I heard whispers that he might have been going to Brisbane. I don't know if that actually went through. I did hear a few.
I'll Google it now while you're reviewing the.
But yeah, I honestly don't know about that one. Billy Magoulias stands out to me. I know he didn't get many minutes for the Sharks, but he still was a classy player. I thought he was a really good lock forward for them. He's going off to St. Helens, I think it is. He's going over to. Oh, he's got Wigan Warriors. Sorry, he's gone off to Wigan Warriors. Billy Magoulias.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's a great signing for them, in my opinion. If he gets a few minutes under his belt, he'd be quite good. And then, as you said, we obviously talked about Aaron Woods the other week, and yeah, very professional, old school sort of front rower as well. Cam Mcginnis, knee surgery. I know he did touch on it beforehand, but what are your thoughts about this one? If he is gone for 2 months or 3 months, what are your thoughts? Who do you see playing in the 13? Yeah, what leadership wise, I think they'll be okay with Dale Finucane because he's a great leader, and he was over at Melbourne. But talk us through what your thoughts are for Cam Mcginnis being out for the first 2 to 3 months?
It's obviously better if he's in the side.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I just think there's that much of a culture shift at the Cronulla Sharks that one person being out shouldn't affect it if everything about their culture, their new culture, is right. So somebody should be able to slot in and make a bit of a difference there. Who that is, I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, Finucane can move to the back of the scrum if he needs to. Again, I mean, I'm biased, but Ronaldo Mulatalo is, in my opinion, is actually a bit wasted on the wing. If he's still playing wing in 5 years' time, then I'll be very surprised. I used to have him at 5'8". I used to have him at fullback, and I almost put him at lock. The only reason I never put him at lock when I had him as a junior was that there was other heavier bodies that could go in his way. Somebody like Ronaldo Mulatalo would be a great lock because he's an all-action player. He throws himself into collision. He's got high work rate. He doesn't want to come off the field, etc., etc. But there'll be other ways, and it all depends on how Fitzy wants to play. He might just literally put another middle forward in there and have 3 props and do it that way. So that one escapes me. Who's going to be the lock in his place?
Geez, I'd love Ronaldo Mulatalo at centre. I reckon it'd be an unreal centre. The ball playing that I saw from him the other day, he's just a freak. I didn't realise he was as much of a freak as he was until I saw him in that trial game. Dead set freak.
No.
God, I would have loved to have been in your shoes and got the privilege to coach him because he just looks like a weapon, or even just play with him as well.
Yeah, he's a leader. He's the most one of the most influential players I've coached. He walks into a room, he sort of owns it, if you like. Like I say, I just can't see him be on the wing forever. I just can't see it. He's just too good a footballer to be on the wing. He's an excellent wing. He got picked for Queensland Origin on the wing, even though he never played. But he has got football in him. So they could do a lot worse than put Ronaldo closer to the action, like you said, centre. But he could even do a stint at lock. I mean, the thing with a lock, I mean, it can just be part of your front row rotation. And again, I know that, front rowers tend to play about 15, 20 minutes and come off. What you can do with your lock position, at times you can have a ball playing lock. So somebody like Wade Graham can lock the scrum and move the ball around a little bit. You can have a lock that is like another hit up forward, or you can have a lock that mops things up. I mean, there's no reason why you can't have a lock of any description because of the nature of them. So they can do all sorts with that. I've been known to play 4 different locks in one game just because of the phase of the game. And it all depends how he wants to play.
It's very interesting the brand of locks we're seeing come through at the moment because for Knights, I'm hearing Kurt Mann's going to be playing in the 13. Dylan Walker gets his stint at 13 for Manly. The 13 position's changed drastically over the past 2 years. I say the 2 years because, as you said, there used to just be middle forwards in there taking that spot. And now you've got guys who preferably play in the halves, in the centres, just these freakish talents that they just chuck in at 13 and just say, rip and tear, you go out there and just play some footy. So it's really changed heaps. And as you say, ball playing locks, we call them now. Yeah, the game's really changed and
changing.
And changing, yeah, for sure. So very interesting to see there who Cronulla end up putting in the 13. For me, it'll probably be Dale Finucane, but they could honestly put anyone there, to be honest.
Didn't Nico Hines do a little bit of time at 6 in one of the trials?
He was playing 7. He played 7 last week.
And in the All-Stars game, he also played at 6, I think, didn't he?
He did, and he played so well. He's changed his game drastically. He's turned himself from this off-the-cuff, explosive, unpredictable sort of player to a calm, composed, I'm going to get those 5 tackles done and kick and put pressure on you consistently again and again and again. He's just turned into one of those calm, composed, I'm going to follow this structure. as I said, structured sort of half. And it's very interesting to see how that game changed. It was very, very surprising for me watching that All Stars game. He nearly plugged a 40-20.
I'm going to put a wrap on Craig Fitzgibbon there. I mean, he's obviously coached him this off season and add some things to his armor, and credit to Nico as well. He's got the ability to do it. I do think the Sharks are the great unknowns. I don't think there's any guarantee that Craig Fitzgibbon is going to be an awesome coach, right? All the signs are there that he will be, but until they do it, you never know. He might be good at doing drills. He might be good tactically. He might be good at pre-season. What we don't know is how he responds to pressure, media scrutiny about his selections, how he responds in the middle of a game when he's got the earphones on like yours and talking to his sideline, how he responds to the player who comes to him and says, I want my contract upgraded or I'm off. You know, these are all the things that head coaches after. And a lot of the way that we recruit coaches, we look at how they do drills and we look at how they talk in sound bites, coaching sound bites. Well, to me, that's only part of the job. So it's a bit massive unknown, this. And to that end, I mean, there's no guarantees that Cronulla are going to be any better or any worse. It's just, this is a great unknown.
I think the thing that people don't really realize about Craig Fitzgibbon as well is he was a fantastic defensive coach. One of the things he was known for was his defense at the Roosters. The reason the Roosters have such good defense is partly because of Craig Fitzgibbon and the work he does over there. I think that one of the reasons that Sharks didn't make the 8 last season, was purely because of the fact that they weren't known as this big defensive team. At times, their defense wasn't fantastic. So I think having Craig over there, it's actually a blessing. It really depends how you look at it. Their defense for me, is going to definitely improve. But we don't know. We don't know until round 1. And I don't really judge. I do my ladder predictions and whatnot, and I say what team I think will go where, but I don't really form a whole opinion until like round 7, 8, 9, 10, halfway through, when I've had a good look. And yeah, consistency for me is key. So that's another thing that Sharks really need to worry about. Consistency. 7 wins, 17 losses, as we can see here. A bit of consistency would be nice for them as well. Some key players that I've got here, and I could have put a bunch more, but they're real key players that I think are going to really make an impact on this side. Key players that I think are really going to be the deciding factor of where the Sharks finish. Dale Finucane, his leadership, a guy that at Melbourne was basically told to stop training because he was training too hard. Nicho Hynes, as I said, changed his game drastically to a really calm and composed 7, which I think will be good for anyone who really goes and partners in the 6 with him. I had my opinions on Nicho Hynes. I thought he was a really off-the-cuff kind of guy, but I'd only seen him at fullback, and as soon as he transitioned to the halves, he just completely changed his game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Braden Trindle, the guy that's most likely going to be with him, he is suspended for round 1, but it's only 1 game. After that, I'm pretty sure that he's going to be the guy that either wears the 6 or the 7, depending on where they want to put Hynes.
Yeah.
So I definitely think he's going to be one to watch. Mcginnis, obviously, when he comes back from that injury, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever the time lapse is, I think he'll definitely be an important part in that side. And then Will Kennedy as well. I saw some real good signs from him late last year as well. So I think he'll be a real factor in this side. What are your thoughts on these key players? What are your thoughts on these key players? Any other comments you'd like to make on Cronulla?
Just Trindle, a big year ahead for Trindle. Kennedy, I'm a massive fan of, and we've covered all the others. I think if they're going to have a good season, that right column needs to fire virtually every week. Obviously, Mcginnis can't do much firing until he's on the field, and Braden Trindle can't do much firing in round 1. But yeah, it's about keeping those guys fit or getting them fit. In the case of Cam Mcginnis, and and their influence around the dressing room. I keep going back to Dale Finucane and Nico Hines. They have come from the best, from the benchmark organisation in our sport. They're going to be bringing some of that with them.
For sure. And Cronulla Sharks, that could go really well, or it could be a really, really interesting season for them. It's going to be a very interesting one, and one I'm excited to really watch as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking 8 to 10, 7, 8, 10. I'm actually going to knock the Broncos down a little bit from last week. Actually, I said 6 to 10. I'm going to go 8. They're going to be 8 to 12 now. The Bronx, I think. And a few things I've heard since then. So I'm putting the Sharks in that zone.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting year from the Sharks. 6 to 10. Probably gonna have to agree with you there. Could even be higher than that, depending on how they go. It's really interesting how the NRL works, and we don't really know until I said round 6, round 7, when we've had a good look at the sides, and we know for sure, consistency-wise, how they're going to go. But my team, the South Sydney Rabbitohs, very excited to do this one. What are your thoughts on South Sydney?
Massive year for them. They have been. When people talk about benchmark clubs, they talk about the Roosters, they talk about Melbourne, they talk about Penrith. They seem to just brush South as if they're not a benchmark club. They actually are a benchmark club. They've not been out of the finals for a long time now. They were one game away from the grand final for 3 previous years until they got to the grand final this year. My fear there, though, is that has been their premiership window. Because I do think with a salary cap and whatnot, you do have a premiership window. So I'm a massive fan of Jason Demetriou as a coach. I believe he should have got the Broncos job initially over Seabold. The reason being is he did a great apprenticeship. He is also a winner. He's won a lot as a coach. I mean, this is what's interesting about somebody like Craig Fitzgibbon getting catapulted into the top job. At least Demetriou has proven at low levels that he can coach. But at the same time, which teams do well after Wayne Bennett leaves them?
Yeah, it's a big loss. It's a huge loss. Wayne Bennett was a guy that I'd go to school and brag to my mates about who are Rooster supporters. I'd say, do you have Wayne Bennett? Probably not. He is the master coach of the master coaches. He's just the pinnacle of coaching. God, and I'm spewing we lost him too, especially now that he's going to be off for 1 year and then going to the Dolphins in 2023, which is going to be very interesting.
I'll pick you up off the floor now. You're crying your eyes out because you've lost the master coach, but at least they're doing it. At least they're doing it in the right way. Demetriou has had nearly 2 years to prepare for this moment. He had Wayne Bennett there as support, as a sounding board. I'm assuming Wayne Bennett will still be that sounding board for him. Everything about the South organisation suggests it's an organisation. And when it's an organisation, it won't crumble just because one person leaves. The problem is, I just think that Wayne Bennett leaves an almighty hole, which is the problem.
Wayne Bennett's gone. Adam Reynolds is gone. Dane Gagai, one of our top strike centres, is gone. There's a lot of guys that have left, and you'll see the amount of guys that have left in a second. I
know. I'm going to say to you that Reynolds being out of round 1 against the Broncos almost gives South Sydney the win. Because if you think about it, right, all that build-up that week would have been about Reynolds. It would have been why, my sadness at leaving Souths and all this. Blah, 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 blah. And Reynolds would have gone all out to win that football game. He's probably been thinking about this since the day he left. Broncos round 1, or when the draw was announced. That just takes a massive distraction out of the way for everyone. It's almost now just another game of football. I have no doubt that the TV people were choosing this game for the very reason Adam Reynolds was playing for the Broncos. That has now disappeared. And it just becomes almost another game of rugby league. I do think now that Souths are specials for that game. I really do. I really do.
Well, I hope so, Lee. I'll be taking your tip on board when I do my tipping cop in round 1. But yeah, I bloody hope so. And yeah, let's have a look at this South side. Some key signings for the club. We've obviously got Michael Cheekham, who I think is a really good back rower. He plays a bit of centre as well, but geez, the amount of games he was winning for the Tigers, people really don't realise. Havili, he was a recruit from the Raiders. We talked a bit about him last week, but he'll be a really good recruit for South Sydney. And Isaiah Tass, I think he's a fullback and a halfback, maybe a 5'8" as well, from what I've heard. But yeah, he looks really good. Some people have been telling me that he'll take that centre spot, which I find a bit hard to believe. They've got Jackson Paulo, Tane Mill, but people reckon that he's really talented. Yeah, the troll will be in the fullback spot, obviously, when he's back from that suspension. But look, it's an interesting
he could end
one.
up in the centres too, because the fella who replaced him, the young kid, did a great job at fullback too. So sometimes when you're coaching a team, you want to try and put all the best players on the field. So it just depends again whether Demetriou goes Matrell at fullback because he's the best option at fullback and everyone else has to fit in, or whether it's a balance. So Latrell will play some centre. I have no doubt.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how the South side shapes up as well, especially come round 1 with Latrell out of the side for the start. I think Blake Taft does get that fullback spot. But yeah, very interesting stuff. Take a look at these losses, Lee. Look at this list. It's massive. Braden Burns, Joshua Cook, Troy Dargan, Dane Gagai, Patrick Margot, Benji Marshall as well, Tauta Moga, Adam Reynolds, Jaden Sewer, and I put Wayne Bennett in there as well because I think that's a bit of a key loss. And obviously I was having a little hissy fit about that before. But
I think the best way of looking at that list is that if Redcliffe Dolphins signed all those players for season 2023, people will be saying Redcliffe Dolphins are going to be a force in 2023, wouldn't they? They are, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some players on there that aren't necessarily household names or first choice picks for certain teams, but particularly as you look down the list and you look at Dane Gagai, you look at Benji Marshall. Can you just imagine the influence Benji Marshall would have on a dressing room? Like, that is a massive loss. Wayne Bennett didn't have him for his fresh young legs. He had him for his experience. And of course, Adam Reynolds. I mean, for everyone who says Brisbane are going to be better because Adam Reynolds is there, well, does that not mean Souths are going to be worse? Because Adam Reynolds isn't there, So, again, this adds to the thought that it's going to be a transitional year. Their recruitment has been a little bit underwhelming. And the other thing I noticed looking at some of their recruits is that they actually came from some of the lower clubs in the comp. So if on one hand I'm saying that clubs recruiting players from Melbourne and Roosters is a positive thing because of what they can bring culture-wise, well, you've got to assume that some of these players from other clubs might have to learn some of the culture of South Sydney. And that then goes back into Jason Demetriou's hands. All the organisations. Like I said, I think the organisation is strong. So to put your mind at ease, mate, I think they're going to drop off a little bit. I can't predict that Souths are going to be in a grand final, but I do think you've got the right coach to take over from Wayne Bennett. I think that out of all the coaching transitions, this has been the best handled out the lot. It smacks of organisation rather than individuals. An ego. I know they have clear, distinct ideas of how they want to do things. So obviously Reynolds is a victim of their policy of not giving anybody past a certain age a 2 or 3 year contract. But also, I'm very good friends with one of their junior recruitment guys, Joel Callahan, and he talks about how they recruit players, and he's got a very clear, distinct designation of the type of person they want in the organisation. So from a South's point of view, I'd be very hard pushed to not see them in the 8. Whether they're top 4 or not is another matter. Now, one of the big things about our game, Les, is that the draw can help you. And I'll be talking about how the draw helped Manly in future weeks, and we're talking about that. Well, the South draw from round 5 to round 15 ain't too bad. And you're going to assume they're not going to get too much hassle from Origin. And that's when the competition can change in and around that time. And yeah, they might be okay. I mean, there's not going to be too many people in that left column going away on Origin duty, I don't think. So, and again, the youth system at Souths, let's put some faith in that. I mean, Blake Taft, who'd have heard of him prior to him coming on the first grade scene?
Yeah, it's very interesting. The players that have come in, the players that are exiting the club, but in a sense, it's sort of like a clean sweep. It's sort of like we'll get rid of the guys, not that we don't need, but we've got depth in this position, in this position, in this position. It's sort of, I can sort of see it as a bit of a clean sweep. For Jason Demetrio, new coach, different standards. Look, it's going to be very, very interesting come round 1 how South Sydney look. I did like what I saw from the trials, even though we did see a bunch of the youngsters. Peter Mamanzalos, the dummy half, Lachlan Ilias, the 7. It's very interesting to see how this South Sydney side looks. 7 wins, 17 losses as well, so same as Cronulla. And then some of the key players there: Cody Walker, Cam Murray.
Was it not the other way? Was it not the other way around, Les? They got to a grand final, didn't they? They can't have lost 17 games.
I must have not changed that over. I must have made a mistake. But anyway, they made a grand final. We know that that's wrong. I'll put the camera there actually, so we can block that out. Block out my errors. But yeah, it's very interesting. I had a huge fuck up then, so we won't worry about that. Key players.
Here's another thing that happened. Sorry, here's another thing that happened last season. Everyone said they weren't defending well enough to win a competition, yet they got to a grand final and came within Cooey of winning the thing. They were that good at attack last year that they didn't have to worry too much about their defence. They could pull up stumps 20 minutes to go and let the opposition score a few. And I'm pretty sure Demetrio was their attack coach.
Yeah, so that's a good sign. It's a very good sign then. Going around 1 if he's the head coach now, because again, standards, attacking. I'm liking what I'm seeing. You sort of put a bit of a light on the darkness, Lee.
Yeah.
You've made me feel a lot better. Some of the key players I've got here, though: Cody Walker, obviously, Murray, Latrell. Ilias, for me, is a big one. Lachlan Ilias, there's a bit of pressure on him to perform. There's a few guys in there that could take his spot, but I think Lachlan Ilias is definitely the way to go. I really like what I've seen from him. He's just a goer, and from what I've seen in the trials, he's a much bigger half than your average half, but he's going to be a great contrast there for Cody Walker, because Cody Walker, again, isn't the biggest guy I've ever seen as well. But I feel like Lachlan Ilias, he plays with a little more structure, but it's still quite, he has a bit of razzle-dazzle about him. But Cody Walker's all razzle-dazzle. So, look, I think it's a really good halves pairing. And, yeah, it really depends how Ilias goes in the 7. I know Demetrio's put a lot of trust in him there. So it'll be very interesting to see how he goes in round 1.
And I think when you look at that key players, a lot of them are Origin and internationals.
Yeah.
Some of the key players list we looked at, there hasn't been as many Origin players as internationals. So Cody Walker, Cameron Murray, Latrell Mitchell, Damien Cook would probably walk into most teams in the NRL. So there's no reason to be that down about things, Les. I do, in the evolution of a team, right? And this goes in any sport. Sometimes you do just drop a little bit. You drop a little bit because of the structure of your roster and contracts and whatnot. And when a big person walks out the door, a bit like Alex Ferguson leaving Manchester United. When a big coach walks out the door, then there's going to be an element of, people. It's human behaviour. I'm going to give you an analogy. I don't know which of your parents is stricter, but back in my day, my dad was always stricter, the one who shouted at me if I put a foot out of the line. My mum was a little bit more relaxed, God rest her soul. And when my dad was out, I used to play up a little bit more. Well, this is the impact now. So again, as much as Jason Demetriou is a great coach and everything else, like Big Daddy's gone, Wayne Bennett, what has Demetriou done with the standards? And again, when I'm looking at the coaching appointments, Fitzgibbon or Demetriou, at least we can look at Demetriou's track record. Northern Pride, Keighley Cougars did so many good things, mate. So many good things. And I know I've missed a couple out there. He's just got a really good coaching apprenticeship under his belt.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how Demetriou goes and all of these signings, all of these players. And yeah, I do like your analogy, although my mum is a lot more stricter than my dad. I'll tell you that for free. My mum, I get chills just talking about it. But
there you go.
Another one that's big for me, the new captain and the new skipper, Cameron Murray. I am very excited to see how he goes this season, especially with the captaincy on his shoulders as well now. He's an Origin player. I reckon he's an Australian player for sure. He's definitely cemented himself a spot for the next 5-10 years or so.
I would like to add another few players to your key players list too, Les, if that's okay. You're going to shout at me for not adding it to the slide, but the player section is called The Pack. I still feel that Souths have one of the best packs in the competition. It's not often Souths get put on their backsides in the middle of the field. The amount of Friday night games I've seen in front of 10,000 fans, or some of the games are so you just knew that Souths were going to march up the field and make very good meters. And Wayne Bennett tends to coach quite a attritional method of football and very simple. And Souths were just very good at that. Very good at that.
Yeah, it's the Souths are very, very good at adapting, playing good football, and the pack is just the forward pack for Souths. I thought was very impressive last season. I loved Mark Nichols. I thought Mark Nichols really stepped up. A player you didn't hear about a year ago, 2 years ago. You'd be asking, who's Mark Nichols? I've never heard of him. He was in the Melbourne system. He was with Canberra, two very big systems in the NRL. Came over to Souths. Wayne Bennett put some trust in him, gave him a starting spot, and he really showed us what he's about. He really impressed me. Wouldn't be surprised if he starts a few more games, or if Demetriou's approach is a bit different and they have that impact off the bench that he brings. He's definitely in that 17 for me. He really impressed me. And yeah, as you said,
one thing I'd like to see Demetriou do. That sounds a bit. Is in the grand final, the intercept try.
Yep.
You have to look back at that grand final and study the tactics. That intercept try was almost 40 minutes in the preparation because, and I believe Ivan Cleary sort of picked it out at half time too, because South very much went 3 in and then move the ball a bit, 3 in, move the ball a bit, 3 in, move the ball a bit. So you could have seen the intercept coming a mile off if you'd have been studying that, which I'm sure Panthers and Ivan Cleary was. Then, so I'd like to see more variety in the attack. I'd like them to consider moving the ball a bit wider on tackle 2, or keeping it up the jumper for more, or whatever it may be, but just being less readable. Just because it's tackle 4 doesn't mean you have to move the ball. And if you get a good ruck on tackle 2, well, why not move the ball on tackle 2 if you've got some decent field position? And I just think they were a little bit readable. And again, Cody Walker could be having nightmares about that and go one way or the other. I mean, Ben Hunt seemed to struggle a little bit after his grand final error. Cody Walker just seems to be made of stern stuff, though, because he kept going in that game, didn't he? He didn't really drop his bundle. So, I just think the organisation's too strong. Bit like Melbourne Storm, this mob. Bit like Melbourne Storm.
Mm,
They've been at the top for a while now. They don't bottom
yeah.
out. Trent Robinson had a wooden spoon year in his tenure. Like they don't, but he seems to have changed that now at the Roosters. But this South organisation is a really strong organisation.
Yeah, it's a very, very strong organisation, and hopefully that gets us a spot in the top 8. I'm really praying for it, and I really like the side.
I think your challenge is with the top 4. So
Yeah,
I think Souths are whether they can get in 4. But again, the competition isn't equal, Les. Like,
yeah,
and the draw could help them and get them a bit higher than they look, or the draw could go against them and knock them a bit lower. That's just the way it is, because it's not everybody doesn't play home and away twice, and not everyone has their full deck, because we have this big thing slapped in the middle of it called Origin that takes away your best players. So I'm like you, mate. Round 8. Let's have a look at round 8, and then we'll know.
for sure. It's going to be very interesting, and I really hope my team goes well. It'll be very interesting to see.
And just because it's your team, you're not allowed to spend 45 minutes talking about them, mate. You've got to give other teams a chance,
Well, I included them today just for that. I made sure that I was thinking of the schedule. I was like, I'll make sure I talk with Lee about the South Sydney Rabbitohs for as long as I can. I'll drag it out for as long as I can.
Today's Big Les podcast, 3-hour special, all about South Sydney. It's team.
We can do it if you want, Lee. Just give me the call. Anyway, well, I won't make you suffer any longer. We'll go to the next team. The Gold Coast Titans. It's a very interesting one. I really like how the Gold Coast Titans are looking. The only thing that worries me about the Gold Coast Titans is experience. Their whole spine is under the age of 25. That's a big stat. That is a big stat. When you're looking at teams, I know, take Penrith out of the equation, because I know Penrith's spine is quite young as well. Nathan Cleary's still 23, Jerome Luai. These guys are still quite young. But geez, under the age of 25 for a spine, unless I've seen a few months of football of these guys, I'm not going to know for sure, but it's a thing to think about. Experience. I think that's the only thing that worries me.
That's enough about the Gold Coast Titans now. Let's go back to South Sydney and talk about them. No. Yeah, I get you. I get you. Your youth can either be a positive in a massive way. I do think Penrith are playing a bit like Parramatta did in 01, in terms of they got so much youth around them that they don't care, they don't dwell on things as much, and just throw any errors into the ether and carry on. So the Titans have got a little bit of that. What I don't think the Titans have, though, is the benefit of having 10 years worth of an academy bringing them through. I mean, they've had a few changes in their organisation over that decade. So I think we're at the start of the sort of Gold Coast growth in that regard. So you're right about the youth, the young side. Justin Holbrook, again, I'm putting him up there with Jason Demetriou in terms of coaching. The big indicator about Holbrook, when he was at St. Helens, mate, he basically turned them into this winning machine that they are now. If you really go into some deep analysis about the Super League, Saints have won the grand final the last 2 years by a matter of a try or whatever it may be. When Justin Holbrook was the coach, they won the grand final comfortably against Salford. And they also won the minor premiership that year. There was something like 20 points clear, which is unheard of. The only time that happens in England was when Wigan were full-time back in the 90s, when everyone else was part-time. Justin Holbrook got hold of that Saints team and really brought them to another level. He's already started to do this at the Gold Coast Titans. I actually feel, though, that they possibly overachieved a little bit last year. They probably overachieved because there were some teams around them that really underachieved. So teams like Newcastle I really struggle to see kicking on at times. Teams like, I'm trying to think who was around about that 8, 9, 10. The Dragons sort of imploded last year. And I think the Gold Coast just ended up being the best of that lot in a way. And they caught a Roosters team and nearly got them that were really busted. So I think the Gold Coast sort of overachieved a little bit. I remember saying it was going to be a titanic task, pun very much intended, last year to turn them round. There's been so much wrong with the Gold Coast Titans over many years. The signing of Jared Hayne, he was earning 6 times, 7 times more than what anybody else was earning, and it didn't really work. It was a corporate move as more than anything. Some of the decisions that have been made in and around the joint over the years, there's been times when the club you thought it was going to get wound up. There's been changes in the boardroom. So this is again, I mean, this is very much similar to St. George Illawarra in that this is now Holbrook's club as much as it can be. I've been, because I don't live too far away from the Gold Coast, I've been privy to some of the things that have gone on there over the years. And one of my friends who worked in admin there once, he was describing something to me over a coffee. And I said, mate, stop there. I said, what you're describing to me is putting a fire out over there and then 2 more fires start over there. And that was the Gold Coast Titans a few years ago. And those things, you can't just turn them around overnight. Obviously, Holbrook, I think if he was a bigger club, the team would be in the top 4. That's how much I rate him as a coach. Even their roster, I mean, he threw a lot of money at Fafita. What happens if Fafita gets injured? What happens if he doesn't play well? There's a lot rested on there. So, as much as it can be, though, I think it's Holbrook's club. I've even seen this week in the news that there was talk of possibly relocating some of the early games because of the floodwaters. Now, I don't know how true that is or whatever, or if it's just media hype. And they also missed a trial, didn't they? The Warriors trial. So that's not great. That's not great prep. I think there's a bit of unknowns. I said they were like St. George. I'm not going to say that. They're a bit like Cronulla in that they've got a good coach. They've had a bit of experience. A few players have moved on, whatever. A bit like Cronulla in the sense that you don't know where they're going to end up this year. I mean, if Titans finish in 10th, you wouldn't be surprised. If you finished in 12th, you wouldn't be surprised. And in their previous history, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, wouldn't be that bad a season, really. It's a tricky one. It's an interesting one and a tricky one.
It's for past 3, I'd say 2 or 3 years, the top 4, I would even go as far as saying the top 6 has been very lackluster. It's been quite the same. And then everyone under that, it's been different. So it'll be very interesting to see how this year goes. We could be totally wrong, and we could have a bunch of players and teams we don't expect being in the top 8. But it's very interesting to see how the Titans go. Just looking at the signings. So they've got Aaron Booth till 2022. I did a bit of extra work on the Titans. Had a bit more time in class to get that one sorted. But Aaron Booth.
Tell your teacher.
Well, please don't. It's Chris too, so Mr. O'Connell. So yeah, he'll kill me. Aaron Booth till 2022. He came from the Storm. He's a dummy half. A lot of people told me that he was going to be the starting 9, but then it was obviously confirmed to be Aaron Clark. So definitely one to watch there. Isaac Liu, I thought was a great signing, and people don't really know how good. People think they don't know how good he is. He's a very experienced player. Till 2024 is a pretty good little window there. I do like that signing. Will Smith till 2023 as well. I thought was a good one. He's a bit of an older guy. He hasn't played much rugby league, but he's much older. He's been signed till 2023 from Parramatta. And he can play a number of positions. He's sort of like your Dylan Walkers, your Kurt Manns, that can just fill in anywhere in the spine if there's injury. come Origin, if guys like AJ Brimson get called in, if guys like, if Jaden Campbell has a really good season, I don't think he'll be playing Origin this season, but if he has a really good season, you just never know. So definitely one to watch there, Will Smith. And then Paul Turner, he's a centre winger, and he's been signed till 2023 from the New Zealand Warriors. Anyone there that really stands out to you? I know Isaac Liu stands out to me.
That's me. That's me too. Because I think Fotuaika's a great player too. I always butcher his name, the lad. He lives right near me, apparently. And he's a lovely person, apparently, too. I've coached against him a few times, unfortunately, because he's good. And he's a good player, mate. He's a really good player. And I think I love it when teams buy other good middle forwards. I think that shows good intent. I mean, too often in recruitment, we can get tempted by the flashy talent. But ultimately, our game is all about a balance of a squad, and that helps the balance of the squad. Isaac Liu is the one that really jumps out to me. Jumps out to me like dogs, you know what. On the losses, I'm not losing too much sleep, but obviously Jamal Fogarty is an interesting one. They've decided to, by the look of it, put their faith in a young Toby Sexton. Again, the emphasis on youth suggests that Holbrook's trying to stay there for a while and got a bit of a long-term plan, which is what the Titans desperately need. So as much as the youth is a gamble, I mean, if they stick together, if most of them stick together in 5 years, you could be looking at a good club. Anthony Dunn was a try scorer. He was solid. And I don't know if you know this, mate, but the idea is to score tries and score more tries than your opposition. And he was very good at it. But the others, I'm not losing that much sleep. Poor Ashley Taylor. I think he's really suffered from the amount of pressure that gets put on him. I'd love to see Ashley Taylor really flourish in the game. Just to shut up some journos who just put so much pressure on him. And I noticed they had 7 wins and 17 losses like everyone else as well. Is that right? Or is that an error again?
I've tried to hide that with the camera, but you've seen my error. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Don't worry about it. Makes you seem human, mate.
Unfortunately, Chris caught me out, so I couldn't do much editing after that. I sort of got through most of it, and then, it hit me.
Jeez, everyone finished in 10th last year because they had 7 wins and 17 losses. Even Penrith, who won the comp, they had 7 wins and 17 losses.
Well, I hopefully I don't fuck it up that much, but look, when in doubt, blame Chris. So that's what I'll be doing for that.
That's your fault, Chris. Yeah.
But look, it's a great recruitment for me. I actually like the recruitment. I like the 4 players that they've gone out and got. And Jamal Fogarty, definitely one that jumped out to me.
I'll tell you what sticks out as well. In this era of us having more players from Polynesian backgrounds that commentators have trouble pronouncing and sometimes infamously. I mean, look at what we've got there. We've got the most simple names for your traditional commentator to pronounce in the new signings list. Aaron Booth, Will Smith, Paul Turner. I mean, how nobody can butcher them, I think. And that was just that stuck out to me. But the best signing out of the lot, Isaac Liu, no 2 ways about it.
Well, I think the reason they signed these guys was I was reading the bench for the trial games for the Titans in the first week of the trials. I tell you what, I think I could pronounce one of the guys' names properly. The rest of them, I absolutely flopped it. I was shocking. Not good form there.
It's been a good development in the game, actually, in the last year or so, that the efforts were made to really pronounce the names properly. Journalists should be doing that. That is their job. And Papali'i is the perfect example. I mean, most of his career he's been called something else. So.
Josh Papali. I've been calling him Josh Papali
too.
I've sort of been getting used to that as well. It's sort of difficult in a sense as well because you just don't know and you sort of just go off what the commentators say. So as you said, it is their job and it sort of has gotten better. Like Nickel Clockstad's another one.
Yeah.
as I said, I just did it wrong then. We've been pronouncing it Nickel Clockstead for a while. I think it's Nickel Clockstad. I think that's how it's pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just it's an interesting one, and it's something that they have improved on. But it's make it much easier with these signings. Very, very easy names. And I'm very grateful for that as well. If they're all in the starting lineup, they'll be very beneficial on my end.
The the other thing about youth, young Les, is that it can recover from games quicker. So if we're talking about a faster game and a game that is more mobile, having a younger team helps that. Just naturally. The players will recover. Just human nature, Father Time. Their bodies will just get better.
Yeah.
Much more quickly.
Well, I bet you're right, but I tell you what, in the front row after a game, I am sort of bit back's aching, legs are done. But yeah, I guess I do have somewhat of a quick recovery. I tell you what, you were talking about youths and the aim of the game being try scoring. I tell you what, Big Les scores a few tries. I'll tell you that for free.
Does he?
Div
and
3.
Mate, there you go. Being a bit older than you as well, I can tell you your body will change. Like it. This is why footballers do retire at 28 to 38. Like it's your body does change, and it's a real wake up call for you. Like we all deny it. I'm in my 40s and still think I'm your age, but
really, I thought you were too. I thought you saw you in class.
That's right. The I would have been mucking around too.
No doubt.
The body does change. So that's on the flip. We talked about St. George last week, how they've got some older heads, and so yeah, this is something else to throw into the mix too. So with their young bodies, so what I'm thinking is this team here, at the bare minimum, they will disrupt some others during the year. A trip to the Gold Coast where a team sort of thinks, oh yeah, we should get over the Titans, they'll end up rolling some teams.
Yeah, for sure.
They'll be fresher and they'll have a more cavalier attitude, if you like, because they're a bit younger,
Yeah, for sure. It's good. Youth is good in some ways, and then it's a conversation in other ways. It's very, very interesting to see how this works out. It could work out one way or the other.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this one? This one really bugged me. It not bugged me, but it was quite interesting, and it definitely did start a bit of conversation between me and my mates. Do you think if Ashley Taylor stayed at the Titans on a lower contract, do you think it would have been good for the Titans, or do you think that it's good that he's now gone to the Warriors and a fresh start, stuff like that? Do you think it would be beneficial for him, or what are your thoughts on that one? It definitely sparked a lot of convo with me and my mates.
Ashley Taylor, if I was his coach, I would do everything I could to take pressure off him. In conversations with the press, in terms of player appearances, in terms of my expectations of him, how he played. I think the treatment of Ashley Taylor has been a botched job. And I just think that he was on a hide into nothing at the Titans. Can you just imagine if he was lining up in the 7 jersey for the Titans in round 1, round 2, round 3? If the Titans didn't win, it would be Ashley Taylor misfires again. Sometimes you just got to get them out of the kitchen. You just got to get them out of the heat. It's the same with Anthony Milford. You're just banging your head against a brick wall. And I think Ashley Taylor, it was just about banging his head against the brick wall. And I think he's going to be a good signing for the Warriors. Consistency is going to be an issue and performances each week. But at least he is playing under somebody who has experience in the halves himself, Nathan Brown. And but yeah, I don't think Ashley Taylor not being at the Titans is a bad thing. for Ashley Taylor and for the Titans. And as I said last week, we don't know what's been going on back behind the scenes, mate. I understand Ashley did it tough for a while there, so a fresh start for him's good, but it might be a good fresh start for the club too.
Another one of the losses that jumps out to me, we obviously touched on Jamal Fogarty, we touched on Anthony Don, Ashley Taylor, Tyrone Peachy. Again, we're talking about these guys that play like Dylan Walkers, that play like Kurt Mans, those guys that can literally just play any position in the side, 1 to 13.
Great pro.
And it's I don't know. For me, it's a bit of a strange one why they let him go. I actually didn't expect him to leave the Titans anytime soon. I thought he was staying there for a long while.
Where's he gone, Peachy?
He's gone to the Tigers. He did a trial game just recently as well for them.
Again, we don't know. We just don't know behind the scenes. He might not have been a great trainer in Holbrook's eyes, or might not have been as healthy as Holbrook wanted him to be, or he might have asked too much money, or there's a thousand reasons that we could speculate on. But I'm with you. I think he's a good footballer. I think he's a really good footballer.
I think he's got a lot of talent.
Yeah.
How much? Look, if you were, this is going to be a tough question, but if you were a coach, how much would you be offering him?
Tyrone Peachy?
Yeah, Tyrone Peachy. If you were a coach, what would you offer him to come to the club?
I had this conversation with somebody today. Do you notice that Melbourne Storm never get into transfer battles with any other club? Have you noticed that?
They don't. Yeah, they know who
Have you noticed the Roosters don't? Have you noticed Souths don't? Penrith rarely do as well. They don't ever get into transfer wrangles, do they? Where are those 4 teams?
At the top, yeah.
Right? So when it comes down to money, how much you pay him and all that, you're right. It is a tough question because what's money. I know some of the best players in the game are getting paid a lot less, and some of the players are a bit overrated and do a bit less. And a lot of them take pay cuts because they want to stay together at certain clubs. So apparently the Roosters, a lot of them are paid unders because of such good culture that's there. I don't think there's any huge earners at the Storm. It's not good for your dressing room I remember being privy to a Super League dressing room, and the 2 props, one of them was a Great Britain international and did 30 tackles and 15 hit-ups a week. The other one was a New Zealand international and did half that, but the New Zealand international got paid double the wage. What do you think that does for dressing room?
Yeah.
Enjoyment. Now, the 2 people involved were great, but, this is never good. All the best teams in rugby league have a wage structure. In fact, even in sport, even Manchester City in the English Premier League, mate, they won't allow themselves, even though they've got more money than God, they will not allow themselves to be involved in a bidding war too much. They won't let the market forces dictate them completely. And so to answer your question, if it comes down to money and that player doesn't want to stay and it's a money thing, the chances are he's halfway out the door. I don't know about Tyrone Peachy if he asks for more money or not, but to build a winning culture, you probably need most people in your dressing room
to want
very
to be
clear, very clear, and very clear on what the wage structure is. So, if you've played 20 internationals, and I can understand why he's got more money than me. Or if he's been at the club for 3 years, I can understand why he's got a bit extra in his contract. Or if I'm a rookie, I can understand, And once your roster gets bent out of shape, to use Ben Ikin's term, with, when Ben Ikin was talking about the Broncos roster being bent out of shape, he was talking about the monumental contract that Milford was on, the big money that Fafita was trying to command, this, that, and the other. He was talking about like the Manhattan skyline of wages. This player's on that much, that player's on that much, and that player's on that much. And I think if you look at South and Melbourne and Penrith and the like, they're probably their Manhattan skyline, something like that. is quite steady. It's probably a little bit lower. And at the same time, I'm not blaming any player or any player agent. They've got to get the best for their client. The player has got a short window. But the best teams, the best teams don't get involved in that kind of. I think the signing of David Fafita, a great player. Did you notice not many other teams came in for David Fafita, publicly at least, anyway? Do you remember that? It just basically seemed to be and that might have been because David didn't want to leave home or whatever. I understand that, but you just know the money that Fafita's commanding, their roster's probably a little bit out of shape, salary cap wise. But this is what they did, I think, to just put the club to the next level. And you've got to say that plus the coach worked last year, plus the fella who's the captain, Tino. He's one of them who just goes about his business and produces pretty much the same thing every week. And he'd be really good for the culture of a joint, I would have thought. And guess where he come from? Guess which club?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think that these clubs, Melbourne, Penrith, and the likes, do you think they're sort of relaxed about signings? They don't get involved. It's just because of that, the reputation that they have. Like, they know that players want to be here. They know that if we offer them a contract, even if it is unders, then they're gonna definitely think about it. Is it sort of because they have that reputation that players want to be here, similar to what Brisbane had a few years ago when they had that really good winning dynasty with Lockyer, with Darius Boyd and the likes? Do you think it's that's what sort of pushes teams to have that reputation? Do you think it's why we don't hear much about these sort of signings? Is that what you're thinking?
I think there's so many players. There's nothing wrong with wanting money. Money makes the world go round. Nothing wrong with demanding the most you can for whatever. That's just life. But you'd be amazed how many players aren't greedy like that and just want the best experience as a player. They want to play at the best stadium. They want to play under the best coach and the best coaching structure. Because life's about a lot more than just getting money in your bank. It's about the lifestyle. It's about where you live. Australia isn't too bad. There's some great places to live in Australia, wherever you play. But you've got that to consider. You've got the players that you play with. I use the example of James Tedesco. How much of a better player has he become since he left the West Tigers to go to the Roosters? He's gone through the stratosphere.
Yeah.
He's just gone through the stratosphere, How many players have gone to Melbourne and become a hell of a lot better? One of the things Melbourne do, they make a ridiculous amount of inquiries about any player they can consider to sign. I can tell you for a fact that they have called me, Melbourne Storm, about players I've coached, and they never ended up signing for the Storm, but they were in the mix. And I may have coached them 3, 4, or 5 years previous. That is just one example of how far back they go. They don't just, ask the agent or ask the previous coach. They do a hell of a lot of research. Joe O'Callaghan, who I mentioned to you earlier from the South Sydney Rabbitohs, he was talking about recruiting players, and he was saying that he rings people like their school coach and their club coach and goes into that depth because he wants a full picture about the person, the kid that he's trying to sign. Melbourne and Souths, where are they on the ladder? And I keep coming back to it. And when you ask about money, I think the right players would play for nothing. You would never ask them to, but they would, wouldn't they? That is. I'm assuming you play rugby league because you love it and you love playing with your teammates. And
I'm actually the one that pays the membership. It's $20 a year.
There you go. So Exactly. So they're the things that carry through. They're the things that win premierships. You can't do the galactical things in rugby league. You can't give everybody 800 grand and have the biggest wage bill. You just can't do that. We have this thing called the salary cap. And the best clubs that stay at the top have their structure. And I go back to South. That's why they're going to be there or thereabouts. I think they might just move down a little bit, but they are going to be. People are going to be looking at the fixture list and going, "Oh shit, we've got Souths away." Still, you know. And yeah, so mate, in terms of Tyrone Peachy, I could chuck a number at you, but the best clubs will be going to any player and saying, "Well, this is what we're willing to give you. We've got a little bit of wiggle room, but it's either this or we'll find another."
Yeah, it's crazy how it works. It is really crazy how it works, and it's very interesting as well. We could talk about this all day, Lee, but we'll go on to some of the key. We'll go on to some
I
of the.
thought you were going to say we'll go back to South Sydney.
we can if you want to. I said the option's always open. We'll go on to the key players for 2022. I've got the Toby Sexton and AJ Brimson combination. I think that's going to be massive. I think that is going to pay dividends. You've got AJ that's played, I think, fullback for about 2 or 3 years now, consistently. And Toby Sexton, who's coming through the ranks, and they've basically said, "You've been coming through reserve grade, mate. You played a few games of NRL now. We want you as our 7. And if they're putting that much confidence in this young guy, you got to expect that he's top notch. You got to expect that he's something special. That's definitely going to be one to watch. What are your thoughts?
I see points in the Titans side. I see points. I see razzle dazzle, and somebody like Toby Sexton, AJ Brimson are super talented, and yeah, seeing them combine will be awesome. It'll be a real flashpoint of the year. It'll be like, how well are they going to go? Again, I mean, one thing that strikes as we're talking about each team is that you think to yourself, well, if one of them gets injured or both of them get injured, where is the club going to be? And again, that's why I keep going back to it. The youth that comes through, your salary cap structure, the amount of players you've got of a certain caliber, as opposed to having a few. And then if they get injured, what have you got left, you know? So that is obviously the question mark over them. But if Toby and AJ are playing together in 3 years, together at the Titans, you know, I think the Titans are going to be there or thereabouts. Like, you know, they're good footballers. Jaden Campbell, another good footballer. Fafita, I coached against Fafita a few times, unfortunately. When I coached Ippy High in 2017, it was Ippy High 10, David Fafita 14 or 12, and then Tana Boyd, who's another good player that I want to talk about, kick some goals. I'll throw in Tana Boyd there now. I mean,
I'd honestly would as well.
That is a good backup. If indeed what he's a very solid footballer. One of the better halves I've seen come through the schoolboy game. Not in terms of rabbits out the hat or anything like that, but in terms of calmness, composure, game management, kicking, precision of kicking. He's a good footballer. And can you ever look at him and think he's had a bad game?
No, not really. And honestly, like, and he's played a lot of footy there, but for me, I honestly thought he would get the 9 spot going into into this season.
Maybe, yeah.
Because he played a lot there last season. He played there in the trial game the other day and killed it. He pretty much played the whole game. He was fantastic in my opinion. So, yeah, Tana Boyd is definitely one to watch, and I definitely should have chucked him there. The big question here is pretty much the Hail Mary that the Titans threw at Tino Fasulamala-Aui to be the captain of the club.
Yeah.
21 years old. He's only sort of just cemented himself in the competition as a star.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this one? He probably won't be on the field the whole time either. He's a big boy, a forward. Forwards get tired. What are your thoughts about this one being captain?
I think because they're a young side, he's obviously got good influence over so many of those young players. He's obviously a bit of a ringleader or whatever it may be. I just see positives. I really like Tino, and his career best is in front of him, and so are the bests of so many of this Titans team. So I just hope they can stay together. When we talk about salary cap management, remember Mcginnis been there a couple of years now in his culture role or whatever they call it. I dare say he's had a bit of a say in this too and put it together. We could start to see the green shoots of some solid Titans seasons moving forward. They were green shoots, by the way, that I was using the hands for. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped back down a bit, because I sort of feel like they overperformed a bit last year because other teams were so poor. So when we talk about each team, we're actually quite positive about most teams, aren't we? I think the only one that I've sort of been a bit negative about, but not negative. Negative's the wrong word. It's just
concerned,
concern and calming the farm a bit was the Broncos. Everyone else, you sort of see them as being better.
Yeah,
I keep going back to it, Les. These clubs have all had the whole off season together. They've been able to, if they've got injuries, they've been able to look after them properly and recover them properly. And the coaches would have had the vast majority of them together a lot earlier. So we're going to see a very different NRL early on, I think.
Yeah, and we touched on it at the start as well. Games changing. The youngest guys are sort of starting to be favoured rather than the older guys that, tearing hammies and doing syndesmosis. Game's changing. It's going to be really interesting to see how some of these teams go. It was a really great chat with you, Lee. I thank you for hopping on. Always a pleasure. Mate. Always a pleasure.
No worries, mate. Good chat.
Anything you'd like to throw out there? Anything that you've got going on? Aim high programs? Anything you'd like to chuck out there?
First of all, if everybody watching or listening could check in with their local rugby league club, you'd be amazed in a community that's affected by floods. You'd be amazed who gets affected and who doesn't. It could literally just be the height of where the building is or what. It's crazy. My local club has actually fared really well. A club about 200 meters down the road has been almost wiped out and lost everything. So check in with your local club, but not only your local club, but different clubs in your community. In terms of aim higher, mate, yes, I'm trying to put events on. It's just that the weather is knocking them back a little bit. The big thing we are looking forward to, though, as a coaching team is we're going to go on the road in the Easter holidays. We're doing 3 different venues in Brisbane, and then we're down in Sydney at a venue I'll confirm very shortly, probably on your next pod, and then off to Melbourne, and then I go to the UK and deliver one over there too. So I'm on the road and in a plane.
Yeah, very interesting. Can't wait for the one over in Sydney. That's going to be really good. I heard you're in Melbourne as well, which is going to be very exciting.
No, good. Can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how it unfolds. But as I said before, thank you for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure. And I always love these chats. Next week, we're going to be going through the Melbourne Storm, which is going to be a very interesting one.
Who had 7 wins and 17 losses?
Oh, I'll try and improve that. The West Tigers, which is going to be a very interesting one. And then the North Queensland Cowboys, which of late is going to be a very interesting one. So make sure you guys tune into that one next week. It's going to be an absolute cracker. But yes, thank you, Lee, for hopping on. Absolute pleasure. And can't wait to see you next week.
Likewise. Take care, mate.